St. Peter's, named after the apostle considered by Catholics to be the first pope, the basilica's curved colonnades representing the open arms of an embrace. This was the spectacular backdrop for the farewell to the 266th pope. Inside the basilica, ahead of the funeral mass, a last chance for visiting dignitaries, including the Prince of Wales, to pay their respects. Sir Keir Starmer, one of dozens of world leaders in attendance. There was applause in the crowd when President Zelensky appeared. But by mid-morning, the invited guests took their seats. Clergy on the right looking out, politicians and sovereigns on the left, but other guests invited at Pope Francis' request included prison inmates, migrants and torture victims. On the streets around St. Peter's Square, 250,000 others waited. And then, to start proceedings, the body of Pope Francis was brought through the basilica. In the coffin with him, his mitre or papal hat, his pastoral staff or crozier, and a scroll, a written record of his life and pontificate. There was gentle, spontaneous applause through the huge crowds as the coffin emerged into the light. Its 14 pallbearers taking it to the front of this breathtaking arena. Presenting it to the world, but not on a platform, Pope Francis had asked that his coffin be placed on the ground.
Dominus pascit me, et nihil mihi derit.
Although elements of the funeral have been simplified following instructions left by Pope Francis himself, the magnitude of the moment is still reflected in the ritual and tradition and spectacle on this stunning stage. It was 91-year-old Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re who presided over the Mass and delivered the homily, reflecting on the things Pope Francis cared about, his opposition to war, his passion for the environment and for the dignity of migrants. He mentioned some notable papal trips. It is significant that Pope Francis' first journey was to Lampedusa, he says, an island that symbolises the tragedy of migration, with thousands of people drowning at sea, as well as the celebration of a Mass on the border between Mexico and the United States. At talk of these causes, the crowd applauded, though there may have been discomfort for some politicians. At the end of the Mass, there was a final blessing for Pope Francis. But he wasn't going to be buried at St. Peter's like other popes, but would instead be taken in a converted Pope-mobile to his favourite spot at a different basilica in the centre of Rome. More than 150,000 people lined the streets to say goodbye, a nod to the connection he had to the masses. At the Pope's destination, a group of people from homeless centres waited to welcome him. So too did the clergy who'd participate in the final part of today's ceremonies. Away from the gaze of the public, the late Pope was laid to rest in a tomb inscribed with just one word, the Latin version of his chosen name, Franciscus.